Welcome to Marketing Made Simple TV. My name is Jeff Ogden, the host of the show, and we're really excited about today's guest. Brian Solis is the author of the new book, The End of Business as Usual, and he's also a principal with the Altimeter Group. So he's going to come on and he's going to tell us all about how the world has changed, how business as usual doesn't work, and what you need to do to adapt to new realities. So let's welcome Brian to the show.
Well, hello, Jeff. Thank you for having me on.
Hi, Brian. It's good to have you here, and I'm excited to have you on the show. I always start off the show with a real simple question, and it is, who are you and what do you do?
It actually is not a simple question. I mean, the first part is simple. I'm Brian Solis. I'm the principal analyst over at Altimeter Group. I've written a few books, one being The End of Business as Usual, which is the latest. Before that, I wrote Engage. I blog at briansolis.com, but I think really what I do is study technology. I study the shift from emerging technology to disruptive technology, and then more importantly, how it impacts consumer behavior and culture. And then from there, I help businesses, organizations, governments reverse engineer what it takes to effectively engage their customer along the new customer journey.
You guys do a lot of great research, and I appreciate the kind of research you do. Why don't we start off by just asking about your book? It's called The End of Business as Usual. Why that topic, Brian? Why call the book that?
You know, I wasn't ready to start another book so quickly after Engage, but I had heard over and over and over that Engage was really hitting social strategists, hitting VPs of marketing. Maybe in a best case scenario, it would work its way to the CMO. But what they were challenged with was reaching the C-suite all the way, going to a CEO and saying, look, our customer is changing. How we engage our customer is changing. And really there was a breakdown in communication, because from there it started going to social networks like Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest, and CEOs would just kind of stare back blankly and not have an answer for why a business needs to change because of these social networks, mostly because they're not using any of these social networks. They're not using smartphones. The majority of them don't even read their own emails. So the reality was that in order to help strategists be more effective in engaging customers, I needed to write a book for the C-suite to show them not how social networks or mobile phones or technology in general was changing consumer behavior, but to show specifically by data and by behavior how customer decision-making was evolving. And in order to reach customers through touch points, I had to show them where these touch points were and to what effect it was impacting their business. So that's what I set out to do, was to inform CEOs of new opportunities, to bring them to the middle with social strategists that had been saying the same thing all along. So it was bringing both ends to the middle.
That's interesting, Brian, that you really targeted the C-suite audience with the book. One thing which you have a video when you're promoting the book, and you talk about the faded stars, the Kodaks and the Circuit Cities and Blockbuster and RIM, the maker of BlackBerry, that's really having a tough time now. Why are things so disruptive now? Why are so many of these companies not adapting the way they need to?
A lot of this is about perspective. There's a memo that has been used in the lawsuit between Apple and Samsung that I think captures it best. And that is, Samsung, like every handset manufacturer, was blindsided by just how big the iPhone would become. And they say in the memo, we had been watching and competing against for years Nokia. And Nokia is also one of those fading stars. So their perspective, their competitive outlook was in the wrong direction and opened the door for a company like iPhone to come in. And the one thing that the Samsung memo that's actually submitted as evidence against Samsung states over and over is that Apple's user experience is far superior. It's the difference between quote-unquote heaven and earth. And it is that approach that Apple took to improve customer experiences that Samsung missed. And it is what many companies miss, is that they get so caught up in competing, managing their business, delivering and growing against customer bases, improving margins, operationalizing, improving efficiencies. They just get caught up in managing and not innovating. And that's what happened with Blockbuster. I think when Blockbuster filed bankruptcy, the reporter on CNBC said, this is less about a bankruptcy where a company just sort of failed to manage itself well. This is a failure in not recognizing how consumer behavior was changing in how they watch video. And that is what the book talks about. It's recognizing new opportunities for innovation, recognizing that innovation is now part of your business model. It shows to what extent people are changing so that you don't suffer from what I call in the book digital Darwinism, where customers' behavior, where society and technology evolve faster than your ability to adapt.
Interesting, and I find it interesting you use the term digital Darwinism because I saw that in your writing. Can you define what you mean by digital Darwinism?
Well, what ends up happening is that businesses are first challenged by the inability to recognize new opportunities. So for example, if you're Samsung and you're constantly watching Nokia, and Nokia is focusing on better scrolling bars and maybe little icons, better keyboards, then that's what you try to supersede. But then here comes Apple, and Apple comes with this glorious user interface, making phones simpler, reinventing the phone experience, making the phone actually not even about a phone. It's about a little extension of your digital lifestyle. That is when a new opportunity becomes disruptive, and not having the ability to, number one, recognize it, and number two, act against it. And act against it, I mean well in advance of it actually disrupting your business. Samsung's actually doing very well, but that's one of the reasons why there's a lawsuit. It's because Apple is saying, look, Samsung failed to innovate. Samsung failed to adapt. It was on a path like Nokia and RIM against digital Darwinism or toward digital Darwinism. But instead, Samsung, as Apple accuses, borrowed the design and the experience of the iPhone and was therefore able to compete more effectively than some of its rivals, but that's also part of the problem. So I think digital Darwinism is something that's actually going to threaten everybody and everything. I mean, from governments, politicians, educational facilities. But in the end, it starts with being able to recognize that things are different. I think one of the things that I say over and over and over in the book applies here very well, and that is around the concept or the notion of adapt or die. It is, yeah, it's gloomy, it's threatening, maybe it's a bit dramatic, but that's what we're seeing over and over again. The statistics in the book are quite sobering. That I think 40% of the businesses in the Fortune 500 list were gone over the course of 10 years. And that's what we have to think about is if we fail to compete for relevance, if we fail to compete for the future, then we fail to compete. The book doesn't just say, look, digital Darwinism, that's a clever term, adapt or die. It also says, the last half of the book is dedicated to, prescriptions. Here's what you do next in order to survive digital Darwinism. And I think that's really where a lot of business books fail, is how to be prescriptive and how to empower everybody who reads it. On that note, though, Jeff, and I'm sorry that it's a long answer, this is work. This is hard work. To change, well, it comes down to change management. It comes down to creating a culture that can be adaptive. And that leads to very personal, deep discussions within the organization to try to do the right thing by bringing the right people together.
Very interesting discussions about adapting or dying. Now, let's say I'm a marketing person and I'm watching this show with you, Brian, and I'm thinking, okay, I got to go talk to my CEO about what's happening in the world. How do you recommend they have that conversation? What would you say to a marketer who's watching this show that tomorrow morning wants to go talk to his CEO?
Let me use the words of a CEO that I actually interviewed in the process of writing this book. He was very frustrated, and I hear this over and over again. I mean, part of my job at Altimeter Group is to work with CEOs and social strategists and actually digital strategists to show the gap between where business objectives are, where priorities are, and then also where the groundswell for innovation is starting to emerge and how to bring them together. And this particular CEO had said, I'm frustrated because I keep getting asked over and over again for social media budget and resources assistance. And he said, if you come to me with a request for money or for people to help you with social media, my answer is going to be no. If you come to me and you're able to articulate how social media aligns with our business objectives and how investing in social media is going to enable or accelerate movement towards our business priorities and objectives, then you will win every time. And I think it starts there. The problem is that strategists often try to make the case for Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter strategies, you name it, by looking at what other companies are doing. And they feel this sense of pressure to say, our competitors are using social networks. We go to conferences and everybody's talking about how they're using social media and how their strategies are proving effective. But CEOs don't see the world that way. That's like going up to a CEO and saying, we need more money for our email strategy. It's not how CEOs think. CEOs think based on the direction of markets and the movement around those markets and the tangible areas around those markets. So that could be money, that could be revenue, that could be loss, that could be referrals, that could be customer loyalty. There's statistics and data and value within the organization today that we can align with to start making the case. The difference is if you come back to the Apple and Samsung case, this is looking at your competitors of how they're using social media is like Samsung looking at Nokia for innovation or inspiration. And that isn't going to convince any CEO to make investments. In fact, we get too caught up in, I think, this social media ecosystem where, we try to come up with new terminology instead of trying to just adapt channel strategies towards business objectives. And in the end, social media, granted, they're dynamic channels, they're empowering channels, but in the end, they're channels. So having a vision, having a mission for what we're trying to do within these channels, of how we're going to be relevant, but more importantly, how it's going to help us actually stay in business or do better business or make a series of strategies that are more relevant and engaging to customers or meaningful to customers or create better experiences. These are all aspirations that need to be answered, but we can't do that by having discussions about social media. We have to use social media to do something else. And in the end, I actually didn't finish that story about the CEO. He ended that sentence with saying, social media must be an enabler for something. So that's where it starts. What are you trying to do? And then how does this help you do it?
I like that description of social media as an enabler, that it really is a communication device. Seems like mobile phones. I was talking to C.K. Curley, and she said it's not about the phones. It's about how consumer behavior changes because of the smartphone. It's about us. And I thought that was a very good idea. So if I want to talk about just, what are the key takeaways that people should remember from this conversation that you and I are having today?
I think the first takeaway is that we're not going to be able to change how a CEO perceives social networks. So therefore, the number one takeaway is stop talking about social networks. Stop leading any discussion with social networks. Start thinking about the importance of how social networks align to business objectives. And then number two, try to think about how you can use it to improve or accelerate those objectives. So for example, instead of debating what ROI is, know that everything has an investment and everything should have a return. Therefore, the return has to be defined. And starting to think about this, taking Stephen Covey's famous quote, begin with the end in mind. That's how I think about things. But knowing that the end has to align with the business objective, or at least something that is going to help the business move in a particular direction or against the vision of a CEO. The other thing that I would say in terms of a takeaway is to realize that your role within the organization is probably more valuable than you give it credit for. The thing about social media, even though they're channels, is that they're essentially windows to behavior, windows to insights. I think companies, for example, spend way too much time listening to conversations and then tracking sentiment and share of voice rather than actually plugging into empathy or plugging into any type of engagement that could inspire you, whether you walk away with insights about how to be a better business, how to refine products, or how to create new products. I mean, it's all about opportunities to earn relevance. I think you need to take part of your listening and really look at ways you could add value, and then add tangible elements to adding value so that it has business impact. The last thing is just really get away as far as you can from the social media ecosystem, because looking at your competitors and what they're doing is actually hurting you. I believe that. I see that. I study that. I believe that looking at what they're not doing is probably as great as you can get. See, we look at things from a social media marketing perspective, or we look at things from social media customer service perspectives, but those are functions within an organization. What we need to do is take a step back and look at how social media plays a part in the overall digital experience. That's going to involve mobile, which is a smartphone, which is a tablet, which is a website, which is a social network. But remember that each one of the types of people who come to those channels are coming to it for specific reasons or intentions or purposes, or just looking for particular experiences. Those experiences have to be defined in each one of those channels. And more importantly, they have to contribute to a more holistic, integrated experience. So it starts with sort of defining what that experience should be, and then how it comes alive in each one of those channels. So I know it's a lot. This is a lot of work, but it's going to have to come down to somebody within the organization. And I just stumbled across an argument the other day on social networks that was spurred from a recent conversation at a conference, which was trying to reinvent ROI to ROA, which I think was return on amazing. Look, I think it's fun to look beyond what it is or the boundaries that are in place within the business, but at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to make this align with the vision of a CEO or an executive. And if it's not you, somebody else is going to step up to do it. You already believe that this is important, so I hope it's you. But that means that you're going to have to step outside of your comfort zone and start looking beyond the tactics of the Twitters and Facebooks and Pinterests of the world. Start looking beyond the views, the likes, the comments, the pins, and start looking about how that matters, how you can start to steer behavior in a way that impacts your business.
Great takeaways, Brian. You had some great things. Stop talking about social. You talk about the value of what you're doing. Move beyond your comfort zone. It is going to be hard, and it is uncomfortable to go beyond what you're doing today. Really good stuff and great conversation. So if people want to learn more about you and your new book and your company, where do you recommend that they go?
Well, they can probably get everything they need over at briansolis.com. They're more than welcome to go to the book site, which is endofbusiness.com. But if you want to follow and join along the conversation, then I'll see you on Twitter by following or tweeting at Brian Solis. Either way, Jeff, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that your community gets some value from this, but I'm just thankful for the opportunity.
It's a pleasure having you on the show, Brian. Thank you. I want to thank Brian Solis for the show. Great show today, great stuff, and really good insights. I mean, I really think this is the kind of show that we really need to do to help marketers have conversations with their CEOs about business strategy. Very useful stuff. On our next show, we're going to have Jeannie Dietrich of Armand Dietrich, PR, Spin Sucks blog, really cool lady. She's going to be on. This show, just to remind you, runs every Thursday at noon. And please check out our sponsors. Avatage is a sponsor, and Watchitoo, who makes this platform, is a sponsor. We'll see you next time on Marketing Made Simple TV.